Hi, dear friend. Hi, random stranger. Welcome to my fourth video. It seems like I always end up making videos about really very different stuff from what I actually wanted to. Because today I'm 20 days on HRT, on hormone replacement therapy. And I intended to make an update video about all the physical and emotional changes that are really happening at like rapid speed. I'm like shocked. But so as I sat down to take notes of what I wanted to say, I ended up with something which I will now call being male is not for me. So testosterone specifically is some kind of a wonder drug, just apparently not for my body and my mind, but you can ask any trans guy, and a trans guy is a female to male transgender person. Yeah, find any like F2M blog on YouTube and have a look. It's really fascinating for me. Like these guys in transition, they are amazed how suddenly they build like double the muscle with half the effort, and it's fantastic for them, and that's great if that's what you feel comfortable with. It's so funny for me to see all these trans guys with like going fully like hyper male, or not, like not everybody does that, but many do enjoy all these muscles and beards. Like, oh wow, I'm growing facial hair, let's like just be a big bearded dude. So for me, the time when I had a beard was the worst, really the worst. I did not recognize myself anymore in the mirror at all, and it took like really time to understand why I was getting so depressed. So it was back in 2014. I was with a girlfriend who really liked like a real man, like bearded, hipster beards, like wood choppers, these kinds of guys. And so I kind of did it for her. I wanted to be the man that she was going to be attracted to, and I had all this facial hair growing and like not cutting it. And then like one evening about 2 years ago, I felt so lost and so depressed, and something like made me realize why. So I went to the bathroom out of this impulse really suddenly, and I started to just cut all the hair out of my face. And I also had this like non-haircut bushy bird's nest at the time, and I only left the mohawk in the middle, and I cut all the sides short. And I think maybe this was already my way to be queer without that I realized, or I wanted to understand that I was queer actually. And like suddenly I felt so very relieved and so much more comfortable in my skin. It became clear like this was the way to go, like queering it up more and finding a way to express somehow that I have this feeling of being different in some way, and approaching any kind of possibility of being some kind of butterfly, and like celebrating my own being colorful. And I took this like really individualist approach. I couldn't anymore pretend to fit into society, even though I couldn't also be clear about why for myself. So for me also, like all these like hippie clothes and everything, it was a workaround to find ways to express myself in a more androgynous way. And I think it's a style that in itself is somewhat less strongly gendered and maybe more feminine altogether. So that really resonated with me. And so I went all into like a hippie style, and I was really happy with that. In terms of being with this girlfriend, like when I look back today, I can realize that I always had like some amount of jealousy towards her, and it was great being with her, but I really actually wanted to rather be her than being with her. And so I was never really satisfied, but there was no way to be satisfied in that. So this also led to fights where I remember how she in this fight once called me like greedy, and she told me I could never get enough, and I really didn't understand what the heck she's talking about. For me it felt really unfair and unfounded, and I felt like I'm giving everything to her, and I didn't understand. And now, like in retrospect, it makes so much more sense, because I can now see all these subconscious forces that influence all my thoughts and my actions, and made everything that I was thinking and saying and doing be informed by this subconscious suppressed feeling of not getting enough, not getting what she got. Maybe she got to be her, she got to be a girl, she got to be perceived as female, she got to do all these like feminine things and look feminine and do all this stuff that wouldn't be expected of me to do ever. And she would always get to be the smaller spoon and to be the cute part of the relationship and be the one to be adored and admired and catered to, just for her being a girl. Now I know that being perceived as male certainly brings with it a lot of privileges. But on one hand, it is really easy to be oblivious towards the privilege you have, because a lack of friction with society is not something that you notice very strongly. But on the other hand, certainly, I took the male privilege for granted that I had. I was not thinking about it, but these male privileges seemed, and also seem today, to just be much less important for my happiness than the privilege to be perceived and treated and like accepted and respected as a female person, which is really what I was longing for so much. So choosing to transition also means choosing to give up male privilege, and it has its like painful edges. A much more crucial loss than the loss of the male privilege is already, and is especially going to be, the loss of this apparent cisgender privilege. If you simplify it really strongly, you can maybe claim that men have it better than women in this society. And I need to say this with a huge amount of nuance that needs to be applied to a statement like this, because I believe that this situation is much more complex than just men have it better. And I can see, like with my history, that men are subjected to this prison of the existing system as well, and very often to their disadvantage, and very often without even realizing it. But nevertheless, definitely cisgendered people, which means that anyone who feels the specific gender that the doctor yelled into the room when they were born is the right gender for them, and it matches their like deeply felt inner identity. These cisgendered people, which is like most people really, a very vast majority, definitely have it a lot easier in the society because of being seen as the default. Anyone who dares not to fit into, say, their own body or the restrictions of gender that are existing in the society definitely gets to have a harder time. So in any case, for the most part, in this girlfriend story, I wasn't even understanding that I cared so little about the male privilege that I had, and I was longing so much for being able to express my female identity. I was very successful in suppressing any upcoming concrete gender-crossing urges out of a lot of shame and fear, and even the thought of being trans would never be allowed to bubble up into my conscious mind. I could not ever risk finding myself as one of these weirdos, one of these confused people, these men in dresses, all these like stereotypical old-fashioned skewed and twisted media images of what a trans person supposedly is, which is really far from reality. But this is what we often see, at least in the last decade. I think it's changing now. But yeah, this internalized transphobia, it's strong in me until today. It's something that I need to work on further. There is a very beautiful thing for me that comes with overcoming this shame and fear, and that is that it allows me to let go and to open up and to forgive some things of the past. For me, interacting with men has really always been problematic. Subconsciously, I tried to live up to an unwritten rule set of what male-to-male interaction is. I felt as if I had no choice but to try and measure my masculinity against any other man's masculinity. And of course, I was always bound to lose. I could never naturally be a man, whatever that means. And saying that, I'm aware that there is a wide spectrum of male identities. You can certainly identify as a male while not submitting yourself to a silly game of hierarchy and boasting maleness. However, still, if you identify as more feminine or effeminate male, or however you want to call it, then there must be some comfort in your male identity, which makes you find your place exactly on this spot on the gender spectrum. And for me personally, it helped me to find myself represented at least a little better in expressing myself in more or less like this queery hippie style. So I definitely felt more comfortable and got a little closer to what my actual spot on this gender spectrum is, which appears to be far too much on the female side to ever find comfort in like being male. Now that I shed the burden of this fear and shame that I mentioned for simply being a quite female person in a male-born body, and even more now that I took this big leap into transition and I find myself experiencing this adventure land of physical and emotional changes, improvements that bring me day by day closer to myself. Now I can, with this, finally let go of this like virtual penis size comparison that is constantly going on everywhere, like under in lower levels. It doesn't matter to me anymore how masculine or not I'm perceived, because I know I'm different. I fall outside of this simple binary. I'm neither and I'm both. I'm female, yet I take all my history with me, which is growing up as like a boy, growing up to try to be a man. And with this knowledge that I have now, I can also let go of the hurt and pain that was caused by the breakup from this girlfriend or the follow-up of that breakup. I felt really deeply hurt when I realized how very quickly she found herself in a new relationship with someone who definitely was like a real man. The breakup itself went quite softly for me, because it seemed like we grew together and we had valuable time together, and we move on to find our paths again separately, but with a good shared history. But then it hit me really hard when not much later I first got to know who her new lover was, and I felt so disposed of and replaced, and I felt especially like I had failed to be the man I was supposed to be. And now she had found a much better dude to take my spot, and he could give her what I couldn't. Because I'm a girl, so how could I, I didn't know. Although we had broken up now soon 1.5 years ago, a long time. I had not been able to see her or speak to her or be free of pain and anger and hurt until 2 days ago. I woke up in the morning and I realized how I had just had a dream a moment ago, just before waking up. I dreamed of seeing her, of meeting her, maybe accidentally. And in this dream, I first felt really uncomfortable when I realized that we were in a room together and she was so close, and we took distance from each other, and we're not really acknowledging each other's presence, even though we knew that the other knows that we're here, and still it's weird and you don't want to go and say even hello. But then eventually I found myself approaching her and apologizing. I told her, I'm sorry that it took me so long to be able to talk to you again. Maybe I wish I would have been ready a bit sooner, but I wasn't. I just couldn't. 1.5 years silence is a long time after a relationship that was not even a year long. Although it was very intense. It was a crazy ride of pushing borders of my comfort zone and maybe also her comfort zone, of challenging deeply rooted convictions, of challenging safety of any kind, safety of identity, of relationships, of what life means. Very, very catalytic. It allowed me to grow. During the time we worked together, and maybe even more after we separated, I grew. So now that I'm free of this having to live up to being male enough, masculine enough, now I can finally look back and have my wound healed and look back with gratitude that she really deserves and that the time we had together really deserves. And that is beautiful. I'm free. I'm free of having to be a man. Amazing. It's amazing. I'm free. Well, thank you for watching. Come back soon.